Jeff, welcome. We are very happy to host you in a way on this video and have this fireside chat, a free-flowing conversation with someone whom we know already for some time, in my case for several dozen years. But our viewers may not know you. I would be surprised, but it could be a possibility. And so maybe you don't mind to briefly recount the main stages of your professional life.
All right. Well, it's good to see you, Isaac. And I'm glad this is a fireside chat today because it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit this morning here in
Okay.
snowy Philadelphia. So I'd
Okay.
love the warm fire created by this opportunity. And yeah, briefly, after a year of law school where I discovered that the law wasn't truly my calling, even though I was doing very well, I wound up becoming an account executive at a large ad agency in Washington, D.C. After a few years in advertising, I had accepted a position with Marriott Corporation to be a regional marketing manager for one of their brands when my father surprised me by saying, "Why don't you join my company?" In a knee-jerk moment of, just instant surprise, I said yes, and I became the 29th employee of what was then a small sales tax information company that I had worked at over the summers, doing some cold calling, and I became its first director of marketing in 1988. I ultimately left the company 33 years later after serving as director of marketing, executive vice president, president and CEO, and chairperson of the board. 28 years as a full-time employee, 5 years on the board. The company ultimately went public and I transitioned off the board after the successful IPO.
So that was very, very brief for an extremely rich and profound professional life. And we're talking in that terms because you described that in detail in your forthcoming book. Maybe you can tell us the name of the book to the viewers.
The book will be named A Work Life Worth Living, Your Guide to Creating a Meaningful Career.
You write that at some point, I will read that you became aware of 4 deeply ingrained beliefs that were guiding your behavior. Somewhere you were in your 30s, maybe early 40s, something like that. I will read them. Seeking approval, fearing judgment, doing to distraction, that I seem thinking, what does it mean? And escaping as denial. How did you come to uncover these beliefs? And what role did that discovery play in reshaping the leader that you became?
I discovered these hidden, sort of what I call a hidden compass. It's like I had a compass that was guiding me that I didn't even know I had. And, what happened was one of the members of our team, a fabulous colleague named Paul Bierns, introduced me to his father-in-law, who was a former IBM salesman, had become a consultant affiliated with the Covey organization, and introduced me to a coach who worked with me on the principles in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And as I started to follow those principles and really try to listen to other people and understand whatever the issue is from their point of view, the mirror effect was pretty powerful in private consultation with my coach, Jim Patton, about more deeply understanding my own point of view. And he would ask me basically, why do you feel that way? Why do you believe that? What's your purpose? What do you imagine would happen? What are you concerned might happen? To the point where I realized that my knee-jerk reactions, my automatic sort of response to things that were happening in the business, in my personal life, weren't aligned with what I really would want to have happen if I just paused to think about it for a few minutes with someone who could listen. And so we went through this process for a couple of years in my early 30s, and it became evident to me that a lot of my automatic responses to situations were driven by, you know, a fear of being judged. So I'm imagining what's that person thinking about me and how are they maybe judging me negatively and how can I manage that so that they
including
won't see me that way?
including your employees. So this is very
Including my employees, my customers, at that point, my father was, still CEO and president of the company, and I did a lot of navigating around what I perceived other people thought or thought negatively about me and trying to manage that without even knowing that's what I was doing. And as he asked me these questions, I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I could see how exhausted I was because not only that, I was so out of touch with any feeling other than let's go, I'm fine, charge ahead, that I just had to keep going, keep working, right? I was absolutely a workaholic because the doing, I came to realize, kind of blotted out the feeling. And because I didn't want to look at how I was feeling. Because once I did, I realized I wasn't feeling very good. But it was empowering. And what happened? You asked the question, well, how did that change my leadership? As I started to realize that about myself, I also realized, I might not be the only person who's walking around with a hidden compass. And maybe I need to be a little more careful about my assumptions and judgments about other people. And it really opened up a deeper connection with the people I was working with. And that ultimately proved to be not only just the right thing to do, but pretty good business too.
You mentioned Jim Patton, and you speak a lot about the role that several mentors played in your life. The latest mentor that you mentioned is Joseph Jaworski. So
That's right.
we obviously have a question about this, and Laurent will ask you.
Yeah, because we had the first fireside chat with Joseph a few days ago, and we would like to know how Joseph's life and teachings or experience, what did he bring to you as a leader?
Jim Patton, my first mentor who I mentioned, gave me a book called Synchronicity, written by Joseph Jaworski. I read the book eagerly because by then Jim had really become this fascinating individual. I had to know more about what this man knew. And when he gave me something to read, I read it instantly. And basically, Synchronicity is Jaworski recounting the science and philosophy that has grown around these seemingly coincidental events, like the people we meet, the breakthroughs that we have, the challenges that we have, and how people recognize patterns in those events that couldn't have been man-made. They couldn't have been sort of just forced into being, that it was too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. So anyhow, fascinated by that book, I came to realize that that's how I was meeting the people like Jim Patton who opened doors for me or threw hurdles in my path. And that's exactly the way I met Rich Tierlink, chairman and CEO of Harley Davidson. I had no interest or desire to meet this man. But one thing led to another, and one door opened. And ultimately, when Vertex had won Best Place to Work for in the state of Pennsylvania, the head of the York, Pennsylvania plant of Harley Davidson walks up to me and says, call me. Next thing you know, 2 conversations later, I'm in Rich Tierlink's office. And he's saying, my colleagues tell me I should listen to what you have to say. And then after we talked for 3 hours, he said, if you need help, call me. And that's how Rich Tierlink became my next mentor after Jim Patton and ultimately the senior member of our fully professionalized board of directors at the company and my personal mentor for 20 more years. So Synchronicity, Joseph Jaworski's book, played this huge role in my career. Funny thing then, I'm in Austin, Texas at the Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods and the founder of Conscious Capitalism, is in the front of the room. There's maybe 200 people there. He says, out of nowhere, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. In the back of the room is Joseph Jaworski. Now, this is 20 plus years after Jim Patton gave me the book. And I'm like, I have to meet this person. And I walked up to him and I said, your book changed my life. I'll go anywhere you can make 2 hours available. I need a new mentor. My mentor is Rich was declining in dementia at that point. And Joseph said, sure, just come to Austin. And then he's been mentoring me ever since. And it's been about 7 years now. So Synchronicity, the book, led me to become aware of synchronicity in my life and career, which led me to become aware of opportunities like Jaworski's in the back of the room. And I knew I was meant to meet him. And he's been, trying to support me and give me guidance and help me understand these deeper dynamics ever since.
I noticed in the back of your on your wall this famous picture of this guy getting out of his own universe with his head outside. Yes, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, the Flammarion engraving, the famous Flammarion engraving.
Yeah, and in a way, what I hear from you is that these mentors have helped you also in this kind of discovery that there was something behind, the reality you were used to deal with.
The message of that etching, which also appears in Joseph's book, is that the old saying, there's more than meets the eye. And my mentors helped me realize that, yes, there's whatever you're talking about on the surface, and then there's what's happening beneath the surface, the relational dynamic, the trust factors, the developments that have yet to unfold, the context. So there's so much more than what meets the eye. And this visual is intended to try to illustrate that, look under the covers, look beyond what's apparent on the surface, and you might discover some great things.
We want now to move at your company, Vertex Incorporated. I will try a play of words. At some point, you've been in the vortex of Vertex.
Not anymore, but yes, I was for 32 years.
At some point you were, right?
Yeah.
And you were, like you said, you were totally absorbed by the action, by doing things for the reasons that even you were not immediately conscious, but you became conscious. Anyway, you started to look for a way out of this vortex, right? And one of the main things that you point to is another discovery. You call them different epiphanies, right? And I will read one of them is that the purpose of Vertex, your company, was not simply selling tax software, because that is the company that was writing and developing tax software to corporations in the United States, but improving, I quote, people's lives everywhere through tax software. Is how this reframing, it's a fundamental reframing of the purpose of your corporation. How did it translate into Vertex caring differently to its clients?
The realization that the tax software processing sales taxes was connected to the sales transaction, which was connected to the acquisition of some good or service, a cup of coffee, anything you buy at Amazon, and that good or service was giving the buyer some joy, some utility, some value, some benefit, right? A more pleasing side table in their living room, or a delicious cup of coffee, or whatever it is they might need, or a medical supply essential to conduct a surgery. Well, I thought of the company like this. I thought we sell sales tax software. what they do with it is up, it's their problem, right? It calculates, it does what it's supposed to do. But as the aperture expanded, thanks to the questions that my mentor was asking me, and I realized that without the tax software and its ability to perform, all of these other services couldn't be delivered. They could not be delivered legally, effectively. Um, we were an implicit part of essentially the entire world commerce. And so then I thought, okay, we need to be authoritative. We need to have, technology that does the task perfectly, or as close to perfect as the customer's willing to pay for, right? But we need to be a lot more than that because their entire business and their clients' joy, survival, nourishment, security, the things people want are dependent on us. I have to tell you, it was shocking to realize that the truth of this and to realize in that same instance that I had no idea of the truth of that. I thought I was a pretty smart guy. I was doing pretty well, did well in school, and there I was, 33. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's all one thing and we need all of it. So seeing the entirety of it all, I just realized that the company was more about cultivating trust with our stakeholders, our employees, first and foremost, our customers and partners. It wasn't enough to just do the tax calculations because we had to be indispensable. And so it shifted our priorities for investment. We grew slower because we built a firmer foundation that became more trustworthy for everybody involved. And when I had clients, three of my biggest clients from Nestle, Ford Motor Company, and General Electric say, we want you to win. You're the good guys. We trust you. Let us help you. I thought, this is what this is about. And
Very interesting in the sense that what you say is that it, in a way refocused, as you say, your priorities, and the priorities became the good of your clients instead of, in a way, closing a transaction and moving to the next client and closing a transaction. The fact that these large corporations said, you're the good guys, it means that you have my back.
right.
You care about my good, and I trust you, I want to work with you, right?
Good.
Yeah. Maybe on your examples of these three corporations, I guess this was not an email from an anonymous guy somewhere in the headquarters. It probably were some, people with a face and that you've met and you've discussed with. I don't know if it was CFO or purchasing guy or whatever. Did you notice in the previous month or years with these specific people anything particular in terms of the way the relationship was built?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when that moment came where they said, you're the good guys and we want you to succeed, we trust you, we were in a room together, physically in a room together, not far from here, as a matter of fact. They had come to Philadelphia to provide me input about the future of the company and
The
what
three
their
of
needs
them,
were.
the
This
three
was
of
three senior global executives
okay.
from three of the largest corporations in the world. Okay, so they weren't, one of them became the worldwide head of tax and general counsel of Ford Motor Company. The other two had significant leadership roles within tax. Okay, so these were, it wasn't purchasing, it wasn't anything like that. And I really believe that your work, and I'm not saying this just because we're on the same call, I really believe that what you have so carefully described and researched in your book, The Caring Company, is exactly what we were doing, although I never would have described it as that. It just seemed like, of course, it's the right thing to do, which is put the customer's need and the society's need first. Be devoted to that. Truly care about that, right? Not what's in it for me, what's in it for you. And the relationship, the trust, the value that comes out of that will lead to positive economics, which we all know have to happen, right? I never talk to the people about like, how the money has to be so and so because it's like talking down to people. Everybody knows that. They all know that. Every time you preach about the money, they're just like, oh, here we are preaching about the money. So I never did it. Um, so let me tell you a brief story to illustrate the point.
Yeah.
One of those three individuals later had become the head of global tax. I would not bother this person. He's had a huge job. But when he called, we had a personal relationship. We had known each other at that point 20 years. He calls one day. Hey, do you have a minute? I'm like, well, of course. He says, are you aware of the evaluation our people have been doing to expand our use of your company's software in all of Europe for the VAT? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm aware of it. He goes, have you been involved? I said, no. I mean, our team's got it. I don't need to be involved, even though I knew that this was a groundbreaking and important relationship in an area that we were just developing. It wasn't just another sale. It was a pretty big deal. But I wasn't going to be helpful. He says, well, I got to tell you what happened. I'm like, I wonder. He says, our team asked all of the vendors to describe every limitation of your solution, what it can't do, and what you're going to do about that. Two vendors said, there's no limitation. We can handle all of your needs. Your company gave our people 10 pages of detailed notes about every single gap, every single limitation, and what they would do. They didn't make any false promises about fixing anything they can't fix, but how they can help us achieve our ends in spite of those limitations. And my people walked in and they said, we know your company's 40% more expensive, but they said, if you make us buy the competitors, we'll quit. We trust these people. He goes, I wanted you to know that. He goes, that culture stuff you've been talking about all these years, he goes, it's huge. And of course, we're going to buy your software.
So that's about the money, unexpected or whatever you can call it, right? The outcomes and benefits which in economic terms that you are not thinking about, you're not planning for that. All you care is about the needs and the good of your customer, but customers, maybe not everyone, but many knows how to recognize and reward that. That's what you mean?
Absolutely. And at the heart of that is our people had learned that it was our culture to make the client's problem, the client's opportunity, our opportunity, not to think about what we get out of it, right? So if you put yourself in the client's shoes, of course they need to know the limitations. And of course, if you're going to help them actually achieve their goals, you've got to come in helping them solve those problems, not just sell them a piece of software, right? And when you do that, the client really feels a sense of true partnership, not just the word that people throw around, our clients are our partners, our employees are our most significant asset, right? I don't want to be called an asset, and I'm sure you don't want to be called an asset either, ever, right? We're people. So anyhow, yes, that I knew that it was the right thing to do, and we did it because it was the right thing to do. It just happens to turn out that doing the right thing is pretty good for business.
I will now move to something that I find quite funny and I would say very deep in the way you write.
Funny, odd, or funny, ha?
No, you will see funny and deep.
Okay.
You'll see why, because very often you talk about some deep epiphanies, and once you share them, there is like, So I will read one.
Okay.
This great epiphanies that you say, wow, I'm shocked, I find a new purpose in my life. My life totally changed. And then people look at you and they, what?
Right.
Again? So I'll give an example for our viewers.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm quoting from your book. After my epiphany, there's one, you remember they were driving in the mountain. And
Hmm.
you find this wholeness in these things, that everything is connected. So after my epiphany, the more I said to others, Vertex software enabled much greater benefits for our corporate customers, their customers, the broader business community, and society at large, the more they would just look at me as if I had lost my mind.
Right. Yeah.
And how did you feel when you witnessed these reactions? This kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
like you say in French, décalage. You know,
Right.
the huge décalage means like the huge. How you say it, Laurent? Like the gap, huge gap between what you feel and what
Yeah.
others feel.
In the Covey book, he opens in the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. He opens with some simple exercises to illustrate the idea of a paradigm shift. And what I realized pretty quickly is I'd had a paradigm shift, right? We were all looking at the same thing and seeing, you know, to the point of the artwork on the back of my wall here, right? I had been seeing the surface of it. I had been given the amazing opportunity to look beyond the surface and see what was underneath. But I remembered who I was just a week before, a month before, a year before, when, I thought, hey, yeah, we exist to sell software. I didn't think we existed to save the world. So I quickly realized that preaching about it wasn't going to be very helpful because I realized that my mentor saw what I now saw, but he didn't try to tell me this is the truth you don't understand about what you're already doing, right? He just asked me questions and, frankly loved me, just, trusted my journey and my process to to struggle with the issues and the challenges he was putting in front of me. And he was giving me provocative books like Synchronicity, like The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of Learning Organizations by Peter Senge, Covey, Seven Habits. And I was so fascinated by this realization that as smart as I thought I was, I obviously didn't know much. And I was just seeking for more insight. And so I'd had these big breakthroughs. So then when I started to try to tell other people and they just looked at me like I was crazy, I thought, right, the old, salesman's mantra, telling is not selling. So I just started asking people, well, what do you think? And we'd have meetings. I met with every new employee for 20 years in groups of 8 or 10. And I'd say, why are you here? What do you think we're here to do? What do you care about? Why do you wear the things you wear? What does the business exist for? And they would struggle with those issues. And I would just leave them and say, look, your work life is precious. There's only so much of it, and none of us know how much of it we've got. So if you think hard about these issues and you realize that there's something else you're meant to do that you really care about, because you're all very employable. If you got employed here, you could get a job, then go do that. Don't waste it building tax software when you'd rather. And one woman did. She left and opened her own business carving birds. And we wound up with a 4.5% turnover rate for 20 years solid in an industry that averaged 17%. While I'm constantly reminding people, leave if you find something more meaningful to you. So, how many people actually saw the bigger picture that I saw based on feedback I got? And I never challenged anyone. There was never any litmus test. There was never any, well, do you see it or don't you? Never. But you could tell because people would, share their thoughts with me, etc. I think maybe 20% of our people, you know, saw something more and found that valuable. Or maybe they didn't see something more in what the company provided the world, but maybe they saw something more in what they were providing their colleagues, right? Because people experience meaning in many different ways, not just in the work they perform. So anyhow, but I never pushed it. It was never expected that you've got to have some higher meaning than just doing the job you're expected to do and earning the pay that you've earned. That's fair enough.
About something that shocked me and Brian when we were in your office. By the way, I remember your office and you explained that it's a very small office. There's a sentence that shocked us that you say, I meet every employee after they're hired. We have a conversation in my office, and at the end, say him, you are free to leave. And the context, people understand that you refused to be this, some people would say guru, right? That discovered some deep meaning and that everyone has to subscribe. And so
moving more towards your view of leadership from your experience at Vertex, but so you write that you had to be careful that you didn't presume to have special wisdom that others at the company would be required to accept. And so maybe the question is why, in your view, should a leader, in particular a leader with profound insight, resist the temptation to persuade employees into accepting that wisdom, which he believes is good for him, for them, for the company, or for society?
Yeah. Well, first of all those nice things Isaac just said, I'd have to say that those were ideals I was striving to realize, and I'm still striving to realize. I wouldn't say that I was very good at any of them compared to the people who I was learning from. But I was honestly trying, and I think people gave me credit for honestly trying and gave me grace about my imperfections, because they knew I was honestly trying to do the right thing. The example of my mentors really guided me to understand that, particularly in the workplace, to assume that you are able to help people grow as human beings, that's different than helping someone become more proficient at a skill that they need to perform their job, right? So if I was a software developer and I had a junior software developer, I would be perfectly fine to say, here's how you're going to do this to get to the next level. And I'm going to show you and I'm going to hold you accountable. And if you don't do it, you may not be able to stay employed. That's fine. But to suggest to somebody that there's a different way to think about your work life in its entirety, and I have an answer for you, because I can see that you don't realize X, Y, and Z that I happen to realize, would kind of be the height of arrogance. And it wouldn't work anyway. Because if my mentor's example with me was any guide, what I discovered could only have been discovered through the act of my searching for it. It never could have been discovered through the act of somebody telling me the answer, right? And school prepares us as though the teacher should tell us the answers. And beyond that, I'm done. My duty as a learner is over. But my mentors were so intriguing just in the way they engaged issues, and the questions they asked were like, I didn't even know that such a question could be asked. And I had a pretty high opinion of myself, and I still do. So then I'm like, what else don't I know? And that then really fed curiosity. So I tried to the extent I could, I tried to, lead the way they led, and create space for people to struggle with the issues themselves and have their discoveries. Because who am I to decide for somebody else what's meaningful to them? Full stop. Yeah.
In a way, I sense that Jeff was avoiding to some power, avoiding to use the power you could have used because of your status, but also because of your development. It's limiting power. I think it's a form of in a sense, paradoxically, of higher power.
I saw it as sharing power. That together
Yeah.
sharing the power and using it together would be more powerful or a higher power than an individual holding all the power and everybody else is merely compliant,
Yeah.
right? And that was the simple philosophy of it. So, for example, I saw myself as CEO as accountable to the highest purpose, values, and vision that we as an enterprise all agreed to collectively. So we had all employee engagements every few years, professionally facilitated to revisit why are we here? What do we care about? And what's the future we're trying to bring into being? And everybody was involved. Everybody was invited to participate and contribute. And we created these wonderful murals that tried to express what we saw as our strategic future and why, and frankly, there were no dollar signs on any of it because it was understood. Of course, you got to be able to pay for it. You got to return something to the shareholders that makes it worth the risk they're taking. Duh. Like we don't need to talk about that a lot, right? It mattered. Trust me, it mattered. And the board was there to make sure we were accountable, but it was never why we're doing it.
Very
And
interesting. Very interesting.
and so those were interesting. And I'd say that, mm, you know, a minority of our employees were really enthusiastic about those events. And I think many people were like, isn't this your job? Like, why am I doing this? And it was fine. They didn't have to, it was like, here's an opportunity. You can have it and you can make the most of it, or you don't have to.
In your book, you write about the first mail, I think, that you received from Rich Teerling, the Harley's CEO at the time. And it was a very short mail that was, "It's not about money."
Right.
Then what is it about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's about making a contribution to the betterment of the human experience. Full stop. And I barely knew Rich at that point, but he had been traveling in Africa. He had witnessed, the early post-apartheid environment in South Africa. And I think it inspired him to send me that note that there are bigger things that we're in service to than just shareholder value. Shareholder value is critical to serve the higher purpose, but it's not the higher purpose.
I attract the viewers' attention to the fact that it has been sent by the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, fully 100% traded corporation. He applied it to themselves, right? That Harley-Davidson does not exist to make money. And they had this joint vision statement. If I can quote it from memory, it's to provide the outstanding riding experience, not even to build motorcycles, not to sell motorcycles, but provide outstanding riding experience with Harley-Davidson. So they were also in something, providing some kind of joy, some kind of outstanding experience, and the money would come, right, as a byproduct, right?
For us, your personal journey is a kind of vivid example of what we call the heart set shift. Do you think that this is absolutely necessary for a company to be transformed, or do you believe that, or have you seen from your experience that working spaces can be transformed without the top leader being, transformed or having the kind of epiphanies that you've lived?
Yeah. So transformed is a big word. I'll put it this way. People can tell instantly whether you care or whether you are acting like you care. Full stop. They just, people know. And if you don't genuinely care, if you think, well, the best way to increase the numbers is to say the right caring things, don't even start. But, you've got to actually care about the people, about the customers, about the value that your efforts are creating in the world. about the kind of culture that you're creating. And if what you're really in service to is maximizing what you extract in terms of return from your investment, then just own that and be okay that that's what that is and be honest. That'd be better than trying to act like you actually care about these other, what I would consider more inspiring and more meaningful futures. But those are more meaningful to me. For many people, and not just the investors or the executives, but for many people in the organization, it's a purely commercial engagement. And what they really care about and what really is meaningful is maximizing the financial return. And there's nothing wrong with that. The money matters. This is not money or meaning. It's got to be money for meaning. And if the meaning is money, okay, be honest about that. We're all here to make as much money as we can as quickly as possible. And great. Then at least people can trust you. I found that, frankly, most working people, once they have achieved a level of basic financial security, money is not a primary motivator. The quality of their work, the quality of their work relationships, the ability to speak their truth and have integrity in the work they do, and to do work that's of true service to others. That's what the global research, peer-reviewed, journal-published, breakthrough global research defines as the 4 quadrants of work meaning, right? The craftsmanship, the ability to have strong connections and unity with others, the service that you create for others, both in your work and what your products do, and your ability to have integrity in the work you do. And that's work that was done by Sarah Wright and Dr. Marjolein Lips-Wiersma, who wrote The Map of Meaning and who are our partners at MeaningSphere.
Which is the foundation of your MeaningSphere, right? And
yep.
That you developed. We know, Jeff, that you have a high regard for our book and you endorsed it, and we are very grateful for it. What resonates most with your own experience and also with your current project? Your experience, of course, in Vertex, but your current project that is called MeaningSphere.
As you've heard, it was a long journey of really applying these insights about what really mattered to me and what really mattered to others in the work we did together at my, company of origin, Vertex, where I was for 28 years. All that time, as I saw people having real breakthroughs for themselves about why their work mattered to them, about the nature of their relationships, a sales VP coming out of a meeting, seeing me, stopping me and saying, what we just did in that room would have taken another company 6 months to negotiate. And we just came to an agreement in half an hour because of the culture. And you just go, he goes, this stuff matters. And when you have those experiences, you realize, a lot of people could benefit. Yes, they can make more money and they can have more job security and they can make better decisions for the business and all those things. And the businesses would benefit. But more importantly, the people would feel a deeper sense of, hey, what I'm doing here really is valuable. And this is a meaningful way to spend a work life, right? And when you see people living that way at work, like I did, you want to be able to make that possible for anyone. And for over a decade, I dreamt of writing a book, trying to convey this idea. And when I started writing the book, I had another epiphany. There are lots of good books like The Caring Company, great books like your first few books are all fabulous. But where do people go to actually get help that they can sustain their effort to realize these ideals? Whether their leadership gets it or not, doesn't matter. You're still free to have the most meaningful work life you can have, regardless of what the bosses say. But where do you go to do that besides the bookstore to read a book? Where do you go to practice? And so MeaningSphere basically is a place where people can go with resources and community to practice building a career worth living. And it's my life's work.
And you launched it. Tell us again to the viewers, when was the launch of this?
The launch in the US was October 15th of 2025. So we're in early phases. The community capabilities are just coming online in the next 6 months. And then we'll expand to Europe in the following year. And with any luck, there'll be a worldwide movement of people who realize that work can matter more than money, right? The
And the
money's
money
essential.
and the money can be the consequence of the meaning at work, right?
Exactly. That they're hand in glove, and that they're not alone. It's lonely. It's lonely. You can't just, talk to the guy sitting next to you about, hey, what's the deeper meaning you experience here? And then look at you
You
like,
say,
what are you
have you
talking
have you smoked something or
Right. Are you smoking something? So, it's good to have, birds of a feather flock together. It's really a healthy thing. And so, yeah, that's our goal, is to provide a really affordable way for anyone who wants to have more meaningful work to build that for themselves, regardless of what their boss or their parents or anybody says.
Yes, you're right, Jeff. There is no peak to the mountain of personal growth. Can you tell us what you mean by that, and also how should leaders interpret this idea of in the context of their own development?
Mm. Mm. It's a very challenging question. Well, I'm 64. If I'd have known how great I could feel at 64, I wouldn't have been such a disaster at 47. But at 47, I thought I knew it all. And, only after then did I realize that I was descending into alcoholism. And then once I got sober, I thought, I got this. Life is good. I'm going to retire. We're going to create MeaningSphere, and off we go. It couldn't take more than 2 or 3 years. 7 years later, MeaningSphere is finally launched, in part because, I got cancer. That wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't part of my plan. And then just when I got into full remission, and I have wonderful long-term prospects, I was fortunate to have such a treatable cancer. Then we get the news that my wife has Parkinson's. So you might think you're done growing, but the universe has bigger plans.
What drives your optimistic view, given all the wonderful things, epiphanies, wonderful people that you met, all the mentors, but at the same time, as you say, sometimes there are like not really nice news. Like you say, how you call it, gift in an ugly
Ugly wrapping.
wrapping.
Yeah.
How do you keep Jeff always upbeat, always smiling? What is your secret?
Oh, I guess my secret, if there's a secret, it's to find mentors and to reach out to them, because thanks to the mentors who were there for me when I had my first gifts in ugly wrapping paper, right? A disastrous product release, a son with autism. They were there to help me see the gift in it. When the people said to us, you could see your son's autism as a gift, I wanted to punch him in the face. But when we did, it became a gift. And so I remember that when the next adversity arises, it's like, I called my editor, Betty Sue Flowers, who also edited Synchronicity, by the way.
Yeah.
When I got the diagnosis of multiple myeloma. And her first words were, "This is here for you, Jeff. Don't just kick this rock out of the way." And I'm like, I know it, Betty Sue. I know it. I'm sure it is. And it has been a gift. So every minute I've got on this side is a gift, regardless of what's happening. And it seems to be working out pretty well so far. So I'm going to stick with that.
Thank you, Jeff, for
Thank you
this
so much.
great, wonderful, deep, and touching fireside chat. And we are blessed having you today. And see you, I think, next time.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Yes.
Merci.
Au revoir.